I'll start the recording, and then I'll say something like, hey, everybody, welcome to Lit Balm. It's our New Year's party on January the 2nd, and we've got some fantastic poetry and music for you tonight. And first off, I'm going to introduce one of our co-hosts, Cassandra Atherton. Cassandra is an award-winning writer, scholar of prose poetry, and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite Leftovers and Fugitive Letters. She is currently writing a book of prose poetry on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. I've seen it, it's wonderful. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry, an introduction, and the anthology of anthology of Australian prose poetry. Prose poetry and introduction is just out, right, Cassandra?
It is, yeah.
Excellent. She is commissioning editor for Westerly Magazine, and I believe she's going to read a poem for us.
I am. I don't have any New Year's poems, but I am going to read a sort of Christmas one from the time I spent last year in Japan, and it's called The Blue Bower. At Hotel Granvia, a skinny Santa Claus in a blue fur suit rings a bell to announce the roast beef is being carved. You take up a naked plate while I wait for the cheesy happiness at the bottom of a seafood doria. I'm post-martini and you've had 3 glasses of wine. Salarymen fueled by bottomless tokuri of sake are cheering as the Christmas tree casts a pattern of turquoise light over the buffet. You nudge a silver ogle from the imperial palace across the table. When I open the lid, it plays Happy Birthday and Blue Santa brings me a slice of strawberry shortcake on a heart-shaped plate. I take the cherry blossom from inside the music box, and one of its tiny petals comes to rest beside my dessert spoon, a pink dot like a full stop. And I would like to introduce Mark. Mark Vincennes is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist and musician. There is nothing he cannot do. He has published 14 books of poetry, including more recently, Becoming the Sound of Bees, Leaning into the Infinite, The Syndicate of Water and Light, and Here Comes the Night Dust. Vincennes' newest collection, The Little Book of Earthly Desires, and a novella set in ancient China, 3 Taos of Tao, or How to Catch a Fortuitous Elephant, are both forthcoming in 2021 from Spite and Dival. An album of music, ambient and verse, Left Hand Clapping, is also forthcoming from Tree Torn Records. Vincennes is a prolific translator, and he's translated from the German, Romanian, and French. He's published 10 books of translations, most recently Unexpected Development by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Mertz with White Pine, which was a finalist for the 2016 Cliff Becker Book Prize in Translation. His translation of Mertz's selected poems, An Audible Blue, is forthcoming from White Pine Press in 2021. His poems have been published in many fabulous journals, including The Nation, Plowshares, The Los Angeles Review, World Literature Today, Raritan, Asymptote, and Plume. His work has received fellowships and grants from the Swiss Arts Council. I'm sure Australia will give him a grant at some point as well, because he's got them from everywhere else. The Literary Colloquium Berlin, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Witter Brenner Foundation for Poetry. Vincennes is editor and publisher of the fabulous Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. He's lived all over the world, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, and where there are more coyotes, raccoons and bears than people. The raccoons snuck in there for the...
I wondered if that would get you, the raccoons. I thought I had to just throw that in.
I love the raccoon. Please read for us, Mark, especially you've been talking about writing so much in the pandemic, so it's exciting to hear that your creative juices are flowing.
They are. This is from the book I've been working on called Einstein Fledermaus. And the poem is called Everything I Ever Dreamed of. And thus the serpent seduces the seductor, entices the fruit to take shape inside the mind, the original burn of fire on skin, the ebb and flow of breath in the secret place of creation. A cluster of young balls of gas burning helium and hydrogen are the mark of the celestial bull standing his pasture, staring down the man in the moon and the earth in all of God's creation. Was this the same who misguided us in the labyrinth, or who the Minoans bounded over in their bloodthirsty rituals? Or the savage who faced us on Pamplona? Can you imagine all that vegetarian power, muscled up? A protector who has no fear of knives or skewers or the fluttering red curtains that hide the maker? Who says you need to swirl around a star to understand all this? And next, we will be hearing from our co-founder, Jonathan Penton, who founded unlikelystories.org, an electronic journal of literature and art, in 1998. Since then, he's lent editorial and management assistance to a number of literary and artistic ventures such as Mad Hat Inc., the New Orleans Poetry Festival, Rigorous, and Big Bridge. In 2005, he founded Unlikely Books, which publishes 3 to 5 books of poetry a year. He has organized literary performances and performed himself across the United States. His poetry books are Last Chap from Virgin Press in 2004, Blood and Salsa and Painting Rust, Prosthetic Gods from New Sins Press, and Standards of City from Litfest Press 2016. And recently, the free e-chap backstories, which you can download from Jeffrey Side's Argotist ebooks. I'm sure we'd all like to hear from you, Jonathan.
All right, thank you, Mark. So as the regulars know, I'm not very prolific. So what I do most sessions is I read something that we've published recently at either Unlikely Stories or Unlikely Books. And today I'd like to read from Type Scenes, which is one of our 2020 Unlikely books. It's by Rodney A. Brown, who comes in occasionally and reads his amazing work. And I'm going to read a poem from it, a prose poem called Interdisputed Circumstances. Again, this is by Rodney A. Brown. Enter hoodies, enter waving actions of hands, enter greetings, enter ratchets, enter grandmother, enter black girls, enter differences. BB pellet rolls in without being asked to enter. Lazy Susan chair enters casting a shadow. Exit concrete and yellow painted lines. Enter fleeing, enter running. Enter a team of office-sized Lazy Susan sofas. Enter gas smell. Enter babies. Exit engines. Enter middle name. Enter no. Enter oil stains. Enter babies growing up into women. Enter given name. Enter trans understanding. Enter surname. Enter more worthlessness feelings. Enter survive. Exit families. Enter families. Exit families. Enter families. Enter flying insects and bugs that crawl. Enter honeybees. Enter grave marker, write MONEY on a cash box. Enter research. Enter a body of work indicating correlation between trauma and suicidal behaviors. Enter Igbo landing. Cultural competencies enter. Enter families. Exit families. Enter families. Enter large square tiles. Enter feet with shoes, feet that do not wear shoes. Enter obesity. And that's from Type Scenes by Rodney A. Brown. All right, it's time to begin our feature. We've got 4 wonderful poets and a wonderful musician to hear from today. And we're going to start with Kristina Marie Darling. Kristina Marie Darling is the author of 35 books, which include Look to Your Left, A Feminist Poetics of Spectacle, Stylistic Innovation, Conscious Experience, and the Self and Modernist Women's Poetry, Silence in Contemporary Poetry, Difficult, Essays on Contemporary Feminist Poetry, Angel of the North, and X Marks the Dress, a registry co-written with Carol Guess. That'll be launched by Persia Books in the United States and Penguin Random House Canada in Canada. Her work has been recognized with 3 residencies at Yaddo, where she has held the Martha Walsh Pulver Residency for a Poet and the Howard Moss Residency in Poetry. A Foundation Valesperino Fellowship to Live and Work in Spain, a Hawthorne-Dend Kessel Fellowship funded by the Heinz Foundation, an artist in residence position at Centre International des Arts in Paris, 5 residencies at the American Academy in Rome, 2 grants from the Whiting Foundation, a Faber residency in the arts, science, and humanities, which she received on 2 separate occasions, an artist in residence position with the Andorran Ministry of Culture, and the Dan Liptherson Prize from the Academy of American Poets, which she received on 3 separate occasions, among many other awards and honors. Kristina, let's see, are you unmuted yet? There we go.
Well, thank you so much for the generous introduction. I've been working on a new project, which is a novel in hybrid pieces called The Last Time I Saw Veronica Parker. And there's a little bit that you need to know before I delve into the work itself. So Veronica Parker is a graduate student at NYU's Paris Writing Program. She owes a lot of money in federal student debt, and she's having an inappropriate relationship with her academic advisor, and she's in really deep with Amex. But this is nobody's autobiography. So Veronica goes missing, and the text is narrated in the voices of 3 characters who were kind of important to her life while she was around. Her academic advisor, the dean who forged her student loan papers, and her mom. So the first kind of piece I'm going to read is in the voice of her lecherous academic advisor, Fletcher Thorne. Meaning, Veronica knew me like no one else ever could. We met at a department party under the sporadic lights of Paris's Latin Quarter. She sulked around the hors d'oeuvres, describing her poem as an exploration of sadness studies. It wasn't long after I kissed her that the department chair pulled me away, only to ask a meandering question about who should be Vladimir Nabokov's next biographer. Trust me, I know what you must be thinking. She was your very best student poet. She even had the privilege and the achievement of panning a collection of essays in the New York Times Sunday Book Review while she was still in your class. You were in charge of her graduate degree in creative writing, and now she's gone missing. Yes, I'm deeply and disturbingly familiar with the entire line of argument. Here you are, a married literature professor, abusing what is and what might always be an unequal share of power in what was intended to be a wholly democratic space. You must understand, frigid gentlewomen of the jury, there was nothing at stake for me in it all. From the beginning, I had no intention of leaving my wife. The day before Veronica disappeared, the mountains had already been buried. Even then, Sissy and I hauled our luggage over the Franco-Swiss border to see the Alps. And once we did, we found ourselves mostly at a loss, wandering around the luxury eco chalet we had rented at €600 per night. All that snow and no one to shovel it, Sissy said. It was then she turned from the window and grabbed my phone off the chair as it lit up in the darkened corner, only to enter the wrong passcode and find it locked in her sweaty little hand. 173333, I told her. Anyway, she was just a student who couldn't get enough of me. I ran my hand along the arm of the chair, almost beginning to believe my own bullshit. She should get on a good path and finally graduate. Sissy rolled her eyes. A path to your office in a pencil skirt, she said. She hesitated, then slammed my iPhone on the corner of the coffee table. When the news came over the landline, the entire horizon went white. What I've been afraid to say is this. Veronica had planned to Me Too me the next chance she got. Her friend Diana had added her to a secret Facebook group comprised of man-haters and militant feminists. Everything, every comment, and every post had a detailed trigger warning. TW bullying, TW mental health, TW sexual violence, TW academic abuse, TW my trampled heart, TW crying and typing at the same time, TW I can't. Well, none of us can, really. What terrified me, though, about Veronica's online community of militant women was the sheer volume of comments that could appear in a matter of seconds. I was kicked out of graduate school for being pregnant. 1,020 reactions, 689 comments. My boss at work misgendered me. 2006 reactions, 781 comments. And somebody right now is typing. Well, what exactly have you done, Fletcher? You're probably wondering. If you hadn't crossed a boundary, Fletcher, then you would have no reason to be afraid. What I have been struggling to say and what I have not yet said. At that moment in time, I had every reason to be afraid. And so I'm going to read a little bit from the next section. This is in the voice of the academic advisor who forged Veronica's student loan papers so that she could go to NYU. I phoned him internationally because he had to have known something. Here I was at New York University's Office of Student Affairs, trying to get him to pick up the landline in his Swiss chalet, which was, if I'm being honest, a giant write-off for the international program's formidable team of accountants. In my brief term as dean of the college, he had 6 complaints filed against him by the women of the graduate poetry concentration, all of which merited formal investigations, but none of which had been looked into yet. This leisurely pace, the norm within our division of the university, seemed to wear on Fletcher, as though he were counting the stitches as they were pulled one by one from a gradually unraveling seam. A little gear in the old-fashioned telephone clicks into place. Fletcher clears his throat and muffles the receiver. Hello, Carly. You again? Fletcher spoke as though he were waking from a long, intricate dream. Given the time difference, it should have been early afternoon in Switzerland, though I could be wrong. What did her text message say? I asked, trying to badger him before he had fully gathered himself from the aftermath of a difficult sleep. Fletcher yawned. You'll have to ask my wife, he said. I could hear him fidgeting in his chair all the way on the other side of the Atlantic. Please don't misunderstand. I'd grown accustomed to Sissy intercepting text messages, emails, account statements, and other various documents sent via post. But I needed more than a displacement of responsibility to satisfy my own supervisor. You mean to tell me you can't check your own phone? I asked. I strained to hear Fletcher over the sorority girls giggling in the corridor. Sissy dismantled it. With all her Botox, her forehead nearly moved when the text came through, he said. I knew it was Fletcher's book, and of course his author photo, styled as the tortured modernist, that brought Veronica to our academic community and to our flock of lecherous male poetry teachers. Honestly, at the time, I didn't care. It was important that we bring Veronica to New York University, and if it was the Paris writing program she wanted, it was the Paris writing program she would get. Even in her absence, I received emails about her brief but caustic essay, in which she brought to our attention the most common logical fallacies in prose works by older white men. The telephone began to weigh heavy in my palm. Fletcher paused for a moment and said, "Please tell me there's already been an arrest." When asked, I deny revising her master promissory note, and I deny altering her other student loan documents. The day Veronica disappeared, she owed $345 in federal student debt, the vast majority of which was accruing compounded interest as she deliberated on which dress to wear to Fletcher Thornton's Paris writing workshop. If I die, my loans will die with me. That had been Veronica's dictum, the pinned status update on each of her social media pages. She styled herself as something of a femme fatale, courting her own death in the name of student loan reform. Her apartment, which she could not afford, is now a crime scene with no evidence and no body. Its ribbons of glowing yellow police tape flitting back and forth like the ruffles on one of her Bergdorf Goodman tank tops. And I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Kristina, thank you so much. That was fascinating. And that's from a manuscript in progress?
Yeah, it's from a novel I'm working on. My agent told me to write a novel because he thought it would sell better than my nonfiction books.
Sure.
And of course, I took his advice. But yeah, it's from a novel and little flash stories.
All right, very cool. Does it have a title yet?
The last time I saw Veronica Parker.
Excellent. All right, thanks very much. Next up is the one, the only Rick Lupert. Rick Lupert has been involved with poetry in Los Angeles since 1990. He is the recipient of the 2017 Ted Slade Award and the 2014 Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center Distinguished Service Award, a 3-time Pushcart Prize nominee, and a Best of the Net nominee. He served as co-director of the Valley Contemporary Poets for 2 years and created Poetry Superhighway. Rick hosted the weekly Cobalt Cafe reading for almost 21 years. His spoken word album, Rick Lupert Live and Dead, features 25 studio and live tracks. He's authored 25 collections of poetry, including the Tokyo Van Nuys Express, Hunka Hunka Howdy, and God Wrestler, a poem for every Torah potion, and edited the anthologies of Poet Sitter, Ekfrestia Gone Wild, A Poet's Agata, and the noir anthology The Night Goes On All Night. He also writes and draws with Brendan Constantine the daily webcomic Cat and Banana, and writes the poetry column From the Lupert Verse for JewishJournal.com. He has been lucky enough to read his poetry all over the world. Rick, what have you got for us?
Well, Jonathan, I thought I'd read some poetry today. It's a good question, though. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I've watched a lot of Lit Balm as it showed up on Facebook Live, and it's awesome to be asked to participate in a series that presents so many different kinds of people and poets to an audience of so many different kinds of people as well. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here. This first poem, well, you know, as a publisher of the Poetry Superhighway, if anyone else who publishes anything probably gets a lot of questions from people asking for publishing advice. And besides just making sure that your work is good and all that needs to go into that, I think the piece of advice that I give more often than not is when you're submitting someplace to make sure that you follow to the letter the submission guidelines of the place that you're submitting to. Even though they might be annoyingly slightly different than the previous publication that you submitted to. This first poem is about a time when I failed to do exactly that. It's called Unsolicited. When I saw the word unsolicited in the submission guidelines, I took it as a life goal. I marched straight to my bank with my latest non-conforming epic. I yelled, "Nobody move, I'm going to read this." The security guard wept. The teller's screams were real. They desperately tried to stop me with bags of money, but I didn't want it. Just an audience, just an afternoon stopped with a stanza. When I left, no one tried to stop me. I ran to City Hall, right into the lobby. Tell the mayor I need this passed into law. I brazenly recited every haiku I'd ever written about the Torah, and a few micropoems I came up with while sitting on a train. The city council closed shop for a week. They made a film about it. My words came out of the mouths of Chucky dolls. People bled in the theaters. People sawed off their own arms and legs. People shouted, "Poetry! Why poetry? No one asked for poetry." I found all this encouraging. I got myself a barcode. I rewrote leaves of grass on my tongue. Tuesday, I thought. It's only Tuesday, while laser beams shot out of my pen into the sky. Thank you. My newest book is called The Tokyo Van Nuys Express. It's the title it may be an obvious tribute to Richard Brautigan, if you know his book, The Tokyo Montana Express. It's a book of poems I wrote in the summer of 2019 when my wife and I were lucky enough to go on vacation in Japan. And I was lucky enough to have a wife who, or still am, by the way, who is very patient while I write down everything that I think needs to be written down while we're on our vacations to come up with these travel poetry books. This poem was written when we dropped our kid off at summer camp here in Southern California for a few weeks, which allowed us to go on this trip. It's called This is the Poem. This is the poem where I tell you about the knot in my throat where when we left our kid for 3 weeks amongst strangers who promised they'd remind him to brush his teeth. This is the poem where I describe the last hug where he patted me on the back several times and, as you probably know, I wasn't able to tell him anything. This is the poem where I tell you about how he yelled at us for reminding him a third time to write postcards to people who love him. This is the poem you may have read before or written yourself when you've come to these times where these things happen. They grow up so fast. They grow up so tall. The doctor says he might be 5'6" someday, which is taller than any of his immediate family. We hope it doesn't happen while we're away. We're going to Japan to feel like giants. This is the poem where we go away to Japan, leaving our son for what seems like 1,000 years. I'm sure you all have been following the news and probably the thing that's been taking up most of our minds is the invasion of murder hornets here in the United States. And so I thought I would do the best I can to help deal with that with this poem. This is called How to Deal with a Murder Hornet. Remember, it's not personal. As soon as you can, offer to double what they're paying it. Make sure they don't have the wrong guy. Disguise yourself as a praying mantis. Religion makes murder hornets uncomfortable. Ask if its mother knows it's doing this. Won't anybody think of the children? Tell it you'll help hide the other bodies. Dwell into its past. Did it start out as a robber hornet? Consider the possibility you had this coming. Ask if it can make it quick. Run, damn you. Run. Thank you. This is another book I have. It's called God Wrestler. It's a poem for every Torah portion. It's a Jewish tradition to study the Torah every week and try to figure out what in the hell it has to do with your life today, which is a hell of a thing to think about because you read the same stories every year and it's not like the words change as you read the same story this year that you read last year. So whenever I do a reading, I make a point of reading my poem for this particular week's Torah portion, even if it's not the funniest poem or the best poem or whatever. It's the tradition that this is the week that we look at this Torah portion, and so therefore there's no other poem that I would be allowed to read. This happens to be for today's Torah portion. It's the end of the book of Genesis. We're saying goodbye to the first family of the Israelites. It's in Hebrew, the word is Vayechi, which I forgot to look up before this reading, but I'm sure it means something, and we'll find out and get back to you. Here it is. I revel in the fake spoiler. We can't start a single episode of any television show without me turning to my wife and telling her, this is the episode where everyone dies. So I hope I'm not giving too much away when I tell you this is the last you'll see of our first family. Jacob, the final patriarch, dead and buried in the Holy Land. Egyptians accompany his burial party. Can you imagine how quickly war would end if we went to the funerals of our enemies? Joseph, the dream catcher, dead and not yet buried in the Holy Land until his body's cameo in the next book. And like any good ending, the fate of all the characters is revealed. Judah will make leaders, Levi, scholars, Issachar, seafarers. Dan will grow olives. Everybody has a part to play. Even the stepchildren are blessed. A little bit of the magic leaves too. Jacob wants to tell his sons the secret of the end of days, but at exactly that moment, the divine spark vacates the premises. You can't give away all the secrets or no one will watch the sequel. This franchise has legs and some things have yet to be written. Be strong, and we will be strengthened. All right. Another poem from my book, The Tokyo Van Nuys Express. This is called If We Could Fly. I tell Addie if we could fly, we'd save so much money on metro tickets. I have to clarify that I am referring to the power of flight and not becoming pilots, though I wonder if you could fly yourself if you would be considered a pilot even though you weren't operating a plane. Would the FAA require you to get a license to operate yourself, or would they give you a pass because they thought it was cool? This is a poem I wrote after the election happened here in the United States. It's called haiku, though purists will probably recognize that it's not actually a haiku. It is a poem, though. Here it is. His tiny, tiny election on display while Americans die. And I've got two more poems for you. This is a brand new poem. I know people sometimes stress out when they do readings about not wanting to do new things, do things that are tried and true, but I say throw caution to the wind, and I'm always most excited about the things that I've most recently written. No one's heard this before, not even my cats. This is called Another Poem for Coffee. I take my coffee black, which is different from when I was younger and held the philosophy that coffee was yucky. Hot chocolate was my gateway beverage, sweet and warm like a dirty metaphor I was too lazy to write. Marshmallows, if I was lucky, before I knew they were made out of animal. How can something so soft be so death? Eventually, I tried an instant, which out of context is all the poetry you need. Sweetened with so much sugar, the sugar people came around and said, "This has got to stop." Once on a trip to the Middle East, I witnessed a man with a Russian accent slowly spit coffee out of his mouth onto the floor of a cold room on a military base. As explanation, he said, it was not good. Why was I on a military base in the Middle East? Why were there Russians? Couldn't he have just not had another sip? Most importantly, I disagreed with him. I learned the importance of coffee as a heating element, as a keep you awake tool. But as my tongue became an adult tongue, I learned to decry the browned waters stashed in the break rooms of working America. The coffee revolution was coming, and I was willing to explain what was wrong to any diner server who put a cup in front of me and dared to say good morning. Today, my coffee literally has the word death written on the label. If it doesn't punch me in the face at the first taste, I want everybody's money back. As for the Russians, they've taken to dribbling our elections out of their mouths. Good morning, America. I can taste your bitterness on my tongue. You can't use the word tongue too many times in a poem. Well, I am again thrilled to be here. Thank you guys very much for listening. Jonathan, I'm really thrilled that you invited me. I am a fan of Lit Balm, and I'm gonna keep watching as long as you guys are willing to keep putting this series on. I'm gonna end with one more poem from my book, The Tokyo Van Nuys Express. You can check out more poems from it on my website, poetrysuperhighway.com. It's available in all the places where you can buy books online, and thank you again for being here. This one is called Back in the Wild West, and it's a poem I wrote for my friend, the poet Brendan Constantine. I message Brendan to tell him he's going to need to get rid of all of his stuff to make room for all the Japanese things I want to buy him. Every object screams his name. I've already shipped him Mount Fuji. He writes back wondering how I feel about pine cones and deer-scented body lotion. I think he's in a forest or just trying new things in Hollywood. Much of what we do is sit at tables where there is food and hand each other objects. We wrap the objects in papers that the other carefully disassembles so the other can use the same paper later on. There are frequent courses of, I remember that paper, over coffee. He still hasn't finished the Ireland I sent him. I'm still getting through a bag of jelly beans from New York City that seems to refill itself. I'd bet he want to know why all the stanzas in this poem have 4 lines except for the first one that has 5. That extra line is a gift from Japan. It's one of the many things. Thank you very much.
Rick, thank you. That was fantastic. Hilarious and insightful as always. And you'll be delighted to know that our friend Leona is in the chat helping you out with your Hebrew. So, if you want to check that out.
Cool.
All right, next up we've got something different. We're going to hear from Willis Gordon on his guitar. It's good to do music. It's New Year's and it's time for some. Willis Gordon is a musician, stand-up comedian, actor, author, essayist, activist, and veteran of the War on Terror. Willis is committed to quality entertainment and the improvement of our communities through art, action, and inclusion. He organized the Rock the Block voter registration concert in 2016 and continues to register voters and fight for civil rights across Stark County, Ohio. He is the author of The Long Road Home and The Empty Boulevards, as well as the syndicated column The Road Forward. His live album, Willis Gordon Live, is available anywhere you stream music. A firm optimist, Willis believes love is not just tender, but tough, and the only way the arc of history bends towards justice is through the hard work of ordinary people. Let's hear from our very cool friend, Willis Gordon.
Hey, everybody. I'm going to say, hey, Jonathan. I'm glad to be here. This is a strange time to be doing music, but it's always cool to be in the presence of friends. So yeah, I'm going to play a song here that is from the first show I ever did. First thing I ever did was in October of 1999 at the Palace Theater, the historic Palace Theater in Canton, Ohio. I was a kid in the chorus of Porgy and Bess. And I've been opening up shows with this for a while. And I hope you guys like it. You might recognize it. Summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping and the cotton is your daddy's rich and your ma is good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings, you're gonna rise up singing. Spread your wings and take to the sky. But until that day, I will nothing with daddy and mama. Standing by. I said summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping And the captain is so goddamn happy, but your daddy's rich. And your mom is good. So hush, little baby. Don't you cry. Don't you cry. Don't you cry. Don't you cry. Don't you cry now. Don't you cry. Don't you cry now. Don't you, 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 don't you. That's summertime. I really love jazz and blues and things like that, and that's been my that's kind of been my trade for a while. And I did hear from Jonathan that Mark was interested. He said, "Is Willis going to play any blues?" So we put the pick down. And I'll play an old song. I first heard an Elmore James version of it, but the one I like the most is Keith Richards kind of found Johnny Johnson playing in these local bars. Johnny Johnson was the original piano player for Chuck Berry. And that is, I mean, it's interesting to see where Chuck Berry and Johnny Johnson's partnership really was, because Chuck wrote all these hits, but for guitar players, it's much easier to play those songs in A, but all those songs are in like C and B flat, which are piano keys, which a musician would tell you, that signature would say that they were working a little closer on that than anybody knew. But this song's called Key to the Highway. I'm gonna do a little abbreviated version of that, kind of acoustic blues style, since my old friend Mark wanted to hear. I got the key to the highway. Oh, and I'm bound to go. I'm gonna leave here run, 'cause walking's much too slow. Oh, give me one more kiss, baby, and I'll be on my way. I'm gonna roam this island until the break of day. I don't want people over there now, and I'll be on my way. 'Cause when I leave this town, I'll be gone to stay. That's an old Key to the Highway blues tune. I really like that. This last one I'm going to do is an original tune off the live album and off the upcoming album as well. It was a single here regionally, and I'm going to play it. It's called "Make Up Your Mind." It's one of mine, and had a little success with this song, so I hope you like it. Make sure I'm in tune first. Been down this road for way too long. I'm finally telling myself I don't care if it's wrong. It's not the right time. But you wanna be mine. Won't you make up your mind? If you want me, baby, we don't have to go slow. But if you want me, you just let me know. Stop fooling around. It's just bringing us down. Let me turn you around. I want you to come as you are, just as you were made. Well, we made it this far. It's not the right time, but you wanna be mine. Won't you make up your mind? That's me.
Willis, thank you so much.
Of course.
There are folks in the chat asking where they can send you cash. So if you've got a Venmo or something, feel free to inform us in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, what a wonderful way to begin the year. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have someone that's very cool to hear from. Lloyd Schwartz, the Frederick S. Troy Professor of English Emeritus at UMass Boston, the longtime classical music critic for NPR's Fresh Air, and a noted scholar and editor of the works of Elizabeth Bishop. Among his awards are NEA and Guggenheim Foundation fellowships for his poetry and a Pulitzer Prize for criticism. His poems have been selected for a Pushcart Prize, the Best American Poetry, and the Best of the Best American Poetry. His most recent poetry collections are Little Kisses and Who's on First, New and Selected Poems, which is coming later this year from the University of Chicago Press. He is the current poet laureate of Somerville, Massachusetts, which is a real place, unlike the places where I'm the current poet laureate. Lloyd, will you be reading some poetry for us today? Make sure you're unmuted here. Let's unmute you. Okay. I hit ask to unmute.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy New Year, everyone. One of the sad things about this last year was that we couldn't travel. And so I decided I'm going to read 4 poems that all have to do with traveling in some way. And the first one is actually a translation of a poem by the Brazilian poet Carlos Drummond de Andrade. And it's a poem that was on the Brazilian equivalent of the dollar bill. The entire poem was actually on the most common currency in the country. It's called Friendly Song. I'm working on a song in which my own mother sees her image. Everyone's mother sees her image. And it speaks. It speaks just like 2 eyes. I'm traveling along a roadway that winds through many countries. My old friends, if they don't see me, I see them. I see and salute them. I am giving away a secret, like someone who loves or smiles. In the most natural way, 2 caresses reach each other. My whole life, all of our lives, make up a single diamond. I've learned a few new phrases, and to make others better. I'm working on a song that wakes men up and lets children sleep. What would we put on our dollar bill? What poem would we put on our dollar bill? Small airport in Brazil. "9:31 in the departure lounge, nearly deserted. Monday night, everyone here is a little too tired to be traveling to another city. I search for an interesting face behind the newspapers and light on a young man, maybe 31, slim and well-dressed, that is, dressed with some thought. His tan jacket and gray pressed pants in muted harmony with a pale yellow shirt, open at the collar. No tie, though there may have been one earlier. They fit him elegantly, suit his thin sandy hair and pale fair skin. His rimless glasses suggest seriousness, not fashion, a tone confirmed by the forward gaze behind them, through them. He wears a touchingly simple gold band on his finger, another example of natural elegance. His wife must share his taste. Is he on his way to her? Is she picking him up at another small airport? Will they embrace warmly, gracefully when he arrives? Or will she be up waiting for him at home, dinner on the table? Or not, already asleep when he finally gets in, after her own long day? Or is he on his way to yet another hotel, after a week of hotels, tired of hotels, while his attractive, witty, attentive wife, with her eloquent cheekbones and slightly sunken cheeks, begins to show her own weariness of spending so many nights alone. They'll cost something, these nights. Everything costs something when you have to make your way through the world. Even if you're not new to the idea, or just beginning not to be new to it. This is a little closer to home. It's called In Flight, and it begins with a quotation from The Importance of Being Earnest. Did you hear what I was playing, Lane? I didn't think it polite to listen, sir. A big, hefty guy next to me, an even bigger guy already squeezed into the window seat. Big, pleasant fellows, strangers before this 3-hour, nonstop domestic flight. But they've been talking away nonstop since before takeoff. Talking business, talking sports, China, India. My next seat neighbor might have been from India. Talking Cubs and Red Sox. They both love them both. Google, the euro, leverage, banks, bailouts, masters of money. It will change the way you think. Great deals and missed opportunities. Exxon, fracking, megabus, Amtrak, breakdowns, lost luggage, and missed connections. A good place to stay in Detroit. Neither Cheez-Its nor Diet Cokes inhibit their juggernaut. So much experience, so many theories, so much friendly advice. The urgent need to tell each other everything they know before the flight is over. The Indian fellow occasionally bumping my left arm in his enthusiasm. Exactly, absolutely. All they've learned and thought, pouring out, yet steering clear of delicate subjects. Politics, they know better than that. Or home. An hour into the flight, my wife has become ex-wife. No names. Nothing about movies or television. No mention of any other book. No music. But thoroughly tuned in to each other. Exactly. Absolutely. Handing over and taking in whatever they can in 195 minutes, like old friends, except not. As we begin our rough descent, a startling silence fills the cabin. One of them has drifted into sleep. Stretching to look out the window, I can make out farmland, roads, then tractors and cars. Some bumps and the sleeper awakes. But the conversation is over. Shutting down, touching down. Each of us left with our own thoughts of arrival or another departure. Then the busy powering up of phones, the clumsy lowering of overhead bags. Jamming the aisle, eager to get off and on with our lives. No handshakes, no goodbyes, but separated in the crowd, and each with a little wave. They call out, Sam, Andy. And the last poem I'll read Thank you. The last poem I'll read is one section of a longer poem called Crossing the Rockies. And it's a poem that takes place in the club car. It's called At the Window. Aurora, Roseville, Magic City, Sweet Grass Hills. Where's your husband? I haven't got a husband. I never married. Winter Park, the icebox of America. Bulk antifreeze, Icicle Canyon. John, not now, not before breakfast. I want to shake this cold. Lovelock, Tunnel City, Tangent, Helper. I hate having people do things for me, cutting my steak. I had a stroke, can you tell? Let's not talk about it. My late husband and I both came from these parts. Anyone ever tell you how the Grand Tetons got their name? Maybe I shouldn't. This Frenchman looked up at the mountains and said, "What big tits." Three Sisters Mountains, Missouri Breaks, Diamond Peak. I wonder, what's the regional specialty for the Donner Pass? Whitefish, Soda Springs, Two Medicine River. I crossed the head of that river and the mouth. Osceola, Ottumwa, Winnemucca, Truckee. I built that bank, the building. My firm did. Floor Systems Repair. Kish and Sons Electric. Sparks. We're the Crook Twins, CROOK, just like the word. Commerce City, Nugget Casino and Hotel. Price. Child playing Trivial Pursuits. What's the president's official theme song? Mother. We're in the money. Pig capital of the world. Smelt capital of the world. Lumber capital of the US. Egg capital of the world. Apple capital of the world. I'm a congressman, retired. I could have run again if I wanted to. Too much flying back and forth, though. I don't fly anywhere anymore unless I have to. That's why I voted against the airline appropriation. Trojan Nuclear Power Plant. Koch Oil Refinery. Biggest little city in the world. It's the Weimar Republic. Geneva, Havre, Malta, Glasgow. We're both retired. Well, I've been retired all my life. We're newlyweds, actually, just celebrating our first anniversary. Fort Union, new time zone. Grand Junction. You should go at Mardi Gras. That's what everyone tells me, but I get so nervous in crowds. Isaac Walton Inn, Polish Museum, Emigrant Gap, Blackfeet Indian Writing Company. Come from Alaska, Ketchikan, going to Florida, son's in Florida, Lake Okeechobee. Got some time on my hands, do a little fishing, meet people, talk to people. The Bar of America, St. James Hotel, Frank Pure Food Company, Franksville, Zelda's Diner, open. Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone.
Lloyd, thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Thank you, Lloyd.
It was so great to hear your work coming from your voice. And yeah, it's wonderful how you read it.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got one more feature coming up, and then we'll go to the open mic. Jessica L. Wilkinson. Jessica has published 3 poetic biographies: Marionette, a biography of Miss Marion Davies,
Oh,
Suite for Percy Granger, and Music Made Visible, a biography of George Balanchine, each with Vagabond Press. She is the founder, managing editor of Rabbit, a journal for nonfiction poetry, and the offshoot Rabbit Poets series. She co-edited contemporary Australian feminist poetry and is an associate professor in creative writing at Armit University, Melbourne, Australia. Jessica, will you be reading for us today? Let me unmute you.
Yep. Hi. You can hear me?
Hi. We can.
Great. Thanks everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm just going to press this stopwatch to make sure I don't go on for too long. Thanks for that introduction. And you mentioned this book, so Music Made Visible, a biography of George Balanchine, is my latest book, and I'm going to be reading from that today. It's a poetic biography of the influential 20th century choreographer who was born Georgy Balanchevadze in St. Petersburg in 1904. He trained at the Imperial Ballet School during the Revolution, defected to Europe in 1924, working for Diaghilev until his death. And then he eventually traveled to the US, where he co-founded the New York City Ballet. So just before I read poems, a few words, I guess, about the research. Research in archives at Lincoln Center, and there's a repository in Harvard, and books and so on, revealed to me that Balanchine was a very difficult man to know beyond the expressions he made through his choreography. And when asked about his private life, he would respond, "It's all in the programs." So it's all in the ballet programs. So I decided that this book was to unfold as a series of Balanchine ballets, from his first work choreographed in his teens to his last before his death. And these poems take cues from historical and biographical details, but also from the music, his choreography, obviously, for those particular ballets, and also his interesting philosophies on life, art, and dance. So I'm going to read 6 poems, hopefully, but we'll see. So the first one, Marche Funèbre, or Funeral March, to Chopin's infamous sonata, comes early in the book as he choreographed the piece in 1923. But the poem collapses a sort of broader timeline of death from across his lifeline, including his early brush with death during those tough years of the revolution, and with the interesting probable murder of his friend, the dancer Lydia Leda Ivanova. Okay. 1. Tragic. Young Balanchevadze, Chopinesque with quiet force. A lock of hair falls over one eye, ringed with shadow and honed on dark days, those hungry bodies shivering. A dead horse carved up keenly, the stolen fish flapping in a jacket, corpses carried high. A cortege like a food line followed by light. Children of the revolution learn to ignite a stove with chair legs, mash coffee grounds for cutlets. At risk of expulsion, Georges sets a march of grief to the dark downbeat. The women move on point in fourth, their hands crossed below the waist. Heads bowed to one side, they form a circle in the hall of the former city Duma, raise their arms, drop to one knee, outwards facing, arms and head to the floor. 3 men cross the stage, bear a girl on her back, slowly, slower at forte. They lower her to the ground, take a knee. Leda knew much too soon. Her friends angle downwards, search the water, find nothing. 2. Lyric. Despite the numbing cold, lice, boils, and black potatoes, it wasn't all bad. The Bolsheviks had some good ideas. Bread and butter engagements raise downcast eyes. On stage, Danilova lights, one by one, upward hopes and homemade calico costumes form grey-capped groups in the air. Twist, arch, cross, attitude turns, live. 3. Tragic. Omnipotent defeat. George Balanchine dies 30th of April 1983. An autopsy explains his slow decline, dizziness. Creutzfeldt-Jakob, a rare and fatal disease of the brain. Examine that photograph in 1982. He's holding the curtain for balance. Mr. B knew grief, how to catch it. Progressive mourning and disillusionment. A loose kneecap to end all serious dancing. One lung collapsed. Sanatorium in the Alps. Divorces. He knew the cause of spirits, the penetrating din of mortality. He knew that death, like dancing, should be complete and interesting to view from all 4 sides. So the next poem, after working for Diaghilev's Ballet Russe, and Diaghilev unexpectedly died, he then took jobs choreographing in Paris, London, and Denmark, and was responsible for discovering 3 baby ballerinas, one of whom was Tamara Tumanova, for whom he made this ballet, Cotillon, a sort of debutante ballet with costumes by the infamous Karinska, who ended up staying with Balanchine, making costumes for his various companies until his death. Cotillon. Slivered moons in the semicircle of mirrors. Madame Karinska has pins in her mouth, feeling into fabric the perfect bodice for movement and charm. Instruments of magic cut against the grain of trial and error, velvet, sequins, satin. Tumanova is a doe-eyed beauty preparing for her first ball. She is wrapped in tulle and stands on a chair. Her mother has cautioned that young girls do not sit in the cafe. Coming of age in the gloved ballroom, a prequel of charged notes and hands above the head falling down. She will meet her fate dealt in tarot and palm. Pirouettes whip up a frenzy as the room spins, dizzying guests, a storm unchecked. Mr. Balanchine is very pleased and buys a fancy chocolate from Pasquia's. That's good for you, he says. She scribbles in her diary, oh, 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 Tamarichka, careful, careful. So now we shift to America, where Balanchine has started the School of American Ballet to train dancers in the style that he wanted to see on stage. But while he was sort of raising this young army of new American dancers, he took other jobs, including on Broadway. So during this time, and this kind of collapses a lot of references to different works, he was mad about the dancer and actress Zorina, whom some of you might have heard of. Broadway. Successes and flops. On Broadway, George learns the basic challenge is to keep people awake. He embraces the concentrated genius of Fred Astaire, fiddles with the pleasures of a hoedown. Dramatic invention in footwork starts the motors on a shoulder-based airplane, and he says, "That's right, bam." He earns huge sums and spends them all on fine champagne, grand pianos, and poker nights with a theatre crowd. Nothing but climaxes. At rehearsal, it's a different story. That travelling mind swivels satire through the Big Easy, taps out an upstate New York comedy of errors. Later, Grecian landscapes chart a solo fantasy of compositional brilliance. Remember Peter's surprisingly long dream sequence? It sparked a vogue, those irresistible cliches of excitement and terror. Always the dream is to get the girl, or to be wealthy and successful, or to develop a national music, or something about marital discord. I do know that George, like little Joe, is trapped at the crossroads of heaven and hell and needs to rise from a slumberous sentiment. to stop being a fool in love, serenading her window, unshaven, and instead to pool his resources. 20 toothbrushes threaded on a string and a foolproof affirmation to Zarina. You see, we'll be okay. How can you fail? And later, hello, I'm an angel. Hello, I'm a potato. Hello, Salvador, I've had another nightmare. And that's, he actually used to ring up Salvador Dali and tell him his dreams. So on a tour through South America in 1941, Balanchine choreographed Ballet Imperial to my favorite Tchaikovsky piece, which is his Piano Concerto No. 2, often the least popular, but it's got this beautiful second section. And his marriage to Brigitte Zorina was breaking down at this point. Ballet Imperial. 1. Allegro Brillante. Hazardous South American entry. Marie-Jean's long feet ride the cadenza as Balanchine adds words to the language of Petipa. She held a great distance to releve and never faked a thing. Double soda basque and dangerous angles. She is rudderless, skimming on quarter point to a sudden stop. Diamonds and diagonals and circles and a pinwheel. He balances a tight mathematical core in the modern palace of academic expression. Gisela too, flying through space like insistent piano chords rising from a vista of the Neva. You can't be undecided. 2. Andante non troppo. Tchaikovsky of the heavy heart dips us into waves and we ripple outwards. Mr. Balanchine holds up his fourth finger and repeats, let be what will be. The violin and cello pull against each other. Because love hurts, elbows have to come in. He won't see Brigitte for 5 months. A slip, so simple, so simple. 3. Allegro con fuoco. Festive in the public eye, no hint of frustration, we return to high spirits and stage divisions as the ballerina is carried in high. He layers excitement, folds in stolen snippets from Paquita. She is an ember. And did you know that running is just elaborate resting? The past and the present seem to occur at the same time, a kind of fiery dissolution of nostalgia. Fontaine never could master it, the lean and lack of plot. He was a patient man with a flower in his buttonhole and polished shoes. In the end, everybody glows beneath the double eagle. Folk steps ever faster. Soon as we start, soon as we finish, with an abrupt kneel. 18 curtain calls. We are left, chilled. He did a version of Swan Lake, but he stripped all the mime and the storyline and enhanced the bird-like movements. For him, it was all about movement and he got rid of any boring bits. And he said about Swan Lake, well, a prince comes out with a feather in his hat and that's the plot. Basis is the score rather than old footwork resistance. His version quickens bird hearts. He attends to the flock who flap and flap and flap and flap and do not mime and do not bow to the cool countenance of the queen and do not harden into feathered ornaments. Tchaikovsky speaks from beyond the grave. He is keen on revision, omit this, adjust that, valse bluette, a new ending, 400 yards of black tarlatan backswept. To find a bird in a little finger or head movement, his creature-like demand. Odette, always unobtainable. And I was just going to finish on his Mr. B's Stravinsky Violin Concerto, which he choreographed for the Stravinsky Festival in 1972. And of all his ballets, which he tinkered with after each performance, this is the one that he said he would never change a thing. And it's one of my favorites too. And you can watch it on YouTube. Stravinsky Violin Concerto. Passport chord to a biography, D-E-A, kick. So much did he love the music. the tick, 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 like Stravinsky's Californian living room. Bodies cover space in contrapuntal blocks with intricate good humor. Interplay, whirlwind, string momentum, so much energy in communion. Speed up, syncopate, switch back, scratching, Russian tea room waiters serve his best work. Thank you.
Jessica, thank you so much. It was great to hear from you. That was fascinating work. You've written 3 such biographies. Are you working on another one?
Yeah, I'm working on a 4th, and I was supposed to be researching, but travel got in the way. And it's on Marie Curie.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we're about to have an open mic, but first, Mark, do you have announcements for us?
I do. I certainly do. And I'm going to say Lit Balm in the new year has decided to go bi-weekly. We were once weekly. This is our 41st episode. Not bad. And we've featured all sorts of dignitaries and highfalutin and not so faluted folk, and we've enjoyed them immensely. Musicians, poets, fiction writers, and we will continue. We have lots of things coming up. So next time, which will be January 16th, we have a very special episode, which is Little Mr. Prose Poem, a Russell Edson tribute. And there will be readings from the letters and prose poems of Edson, featuring Nin Andrews, Denise Duhamel, Chada Nord, Maxine Chernoff, Gian Lombardo, Frederick Friedman, Peter Johnson, and Cassandra Atherton, our very own co-host. So that should be something. And then on January 30th, we have a special feature of New Zealand poets. Let's hope that we can spread the word throughout the United States that New Zealand poets are amazing. We have Ian Britton, Lisa Samuels, and Jen Crawford. So don't miss that. And now I'm going to hand it over to Cassandra, who's taking care of the open mic, I believe.
Yes, it's been a stellar morning here in Australia, but evening for most of you. And I do want to, make sure that we thank appropriately our amazing people so far. So Kristina Marie Darling, Rick Lupert, Willis Gordon, Lloyd Schwartz, and Jessica Wilkinson. So I've had a ball, and let the ball continue rolling with our wonderful open mic. The first person we have Jonathan to unmute is Joshua Corwin, and he's going to introduce his poem and then read it for us.
Okay. Hey, I'm Joshua Corwin. Thanks. Did you want a 1-sentence bio? I know in previous times you guys wanted that.
But whatever you like, you can introduce yourself.
I'll just do that. Yeah. And this is a short one. So I guess, yeah, I'm a neurodiverse Pushcart Prize nominated poet. I like wearing hats. I'm a UCLA lecturer, podcaster, editor, teacher, and I have a book, Becoming Vulnerable, about my experience with autism, addiction, sobriety, spirituality, website, joshuacorwin.com. And this poem is, I wrote this poem, it's a short one after finding out a friend of mine was in a coma this past year, 2020. And it's part of an unpublished chapbook about my experience with suicidal ideation, depression, love, and friends going to the hospital. It's called Untitled. There are no words. I love her, even in the darkness. And she will walk again, and rivers will unfreeze. I've seen 8 angels, heard many stories, but this is the saddest I've ever seen. I will show you the cracks in the walls, and you'll look at me and smile, because there's nothing else that can be done except cry. Thank you.
Wow, that was really moving. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was
Thank
a
you.
wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful performance of the poem. The next person we have up is one of my faves, Bob Heyman, and I'm going to say his name right this time so he'll like me even more. So Bob, can we unmute Bob for his New Year Lit Balm open mic reading?
Okay, thank you. Information. There would be blood, more blood than that. The record on the Victrola kept going around and around and around, but she had nothing more to say. Later on, he made it into a poem that would require footnotes to be properly understood. He dedicated it to her, of course, even though she was only a figment of his imagination.
Wow, they're always good, but today was especially good. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you.
Next, we have DeWitt Henry, who is going to be reading for us. So can we unmute him in his wonderful orange jacket so we can have some poetry?
Thanks. This is called Medallion. Our family kept heirlooms, both obvious and strange. Coconut pirate heads with bandanas and wooden daggers in their teeth. A polar bear skin rug, a collapsible hat. But most fascinating was a gold medallion with a photograph of my mother, posed and colorized and mounted under glass. She kept it on her desk. I'd never known her with dark hair, so young, so beautiful. I was 9 when she left alone for a vacation. We'd never been separated. I fell sick with a fever and begged my older sister to bring me the medallion, which I lifted from its case and kissed, then pressed against my cheeks, feeling how cool the metal was. Soon after, days, not weeks, she filled my doorway, rushed in and gathered me in arms. For my mother, the medallion had been an artifact of vanity taken before the births of my brothers and sister, before my father's drink and adultery, before her own broken dreams. During her absence, she had decided to stay with the marriage, she explained. I was the writer home from college. I'd begun researching our family's story and asked to see the medallion. My sister, in her mid-80s, divorced, house-ridden, and a continent away, remains the medallion's keeper for her daughters and grandsons. Thanks. Happy New Year.
Wow, that was beautifully crafted, beautifully read. I can see the color. Those colorized photos are quite amazing, aren't they? I've got quite a lot in my family as well. So lovely. Thank you so much for sharing. The next we have is John Wombat Wessick, who is going to read for us today. I'm sure John's
Thank
in
you.
house.
Here I am. And by the way, I have more pictures of wombats on my website, and I'll post a link there. Okay. The Shaman in the library. Naked except for a loincloth, ritual scars, and streaks of red clay, he attends the staff meeting. Bowl haircut, back straight, face impassive. Why is he here? No one knows. Since the library opened, he's pushed the loaded book cart and replaced Suzanne Summers and Gwyneth Paltrow in the diet and exercise section. Trembling patrons pay late fees promptly when he stands by the circulation desk. A few parents complain their teenagers shadow him, chasing rumors of hallucinogenic ayahuasca vines hidden in the botany section. And after the singed carpet incident, management forbade cooking fires, no more fresh rabbit meat, only packets of microwaved cassava. He pricks his fingertip at shift's end and fills out his timesheet with human blood. It's a good life. His employer provides health insurance and a retirement plan. But when the wild parrots come to strip fruit from nearby trees, he remembers the land of his birth, his vision quest, fasting to the point of death, and how his spirit animal came to him. He remembers inhabiting the jaguar's body, its savage strength, and the power he gained, power to take life and heal. Free from culture and convention, he hunted at night, the heart-pounding chase, the taste of wild boar's blood.
Wow, another amazing one. You always read so well. I love to listen to your poetry on open mic. Thank you. We have 2 short people left. We have, well, they may not be short, but they'll have a short piece for us. So Nicole Chapman is next, and I'm excited to hear Nicole. She's a bit nervous, but I don't think she has any reason to be because we're all so welcoming and wonderful. So is Nicole there to unmute, Jonathan? Brilliant.
I'm here.
Take us away,
Can you guys
Nicole.
hear me? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay. I'm really nervous, sorry.
Don't be nervous.
This poem's called Missing You. My husband was overseas and I was on the bus to go see him when he came back. It's riding on a bus to come see you, listening to our song through and through. Makes me wonder how I could have been so stupid when I found the one I wanted, and that's my Cupid. He must really love me to death do us part. I really hurt him bad. I really broke his heart. Sitting here thinking of the good times we had, I just hope there's more to come of that. As I sit here waiting, the more excited I get, but I can't see him, not just quite yet. I really wish I could. I miss him so much. What I really miss the most is his wonderful touch. But sometimes you have the tendency to be a pain, but my love for you will always stay the same.
That was wonderful. I don't know why you were so worried. I love the rhyme. And I mean, we've all had people that can be a pain, but we love them anyway. So great. Thank you so much for reading for us. And the last person we have is Cindy Hockman, who's one of our regulars and is always a great way to wind up a Lit Balm open mic. So over to you, Cindy.
Thank you very much, Cassandra. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm going to read a prose poem thinking about the Georgia Senate race on Tuesday. And this poem does have senators in it, but it also has bears because I sort of wrote it for our friend Bob Heyman, who you like and who I like. He's my friend and collaborator, and he writes a lot of prose poems with bears in them. So I figured I'd try my hand at it. This is called The Senators, or Loaded for Bear. The senators are trampling through this poem like legislative deer caught in the rose bushes. Some are wearing Republican red coats, others blue ties in the shape of England. They have flag pins over their lapels, but they pledge allegiance to the bears. Their national anthem is Black Bear. Their State of the Union is Brown Bear. Their vote on climate change is Polar Bear. Their stance on guns is silence. Instead, they cast unanimous eyes for hibernating for the winter. The senators waddle single file like a row of German ducklings, orderly but defeated. They sit in sandboxes of mud with bloody paws and pockets full of dirty money. When recess is called, they pack up their soapboxes and bullhorns and retreat to various golf courses and corrupt caves. Vote blue if you're in Georgia, vote blue.
That was wonderful. Thank you. I don't know any other place that we could get raccoons, coyotes, bears, and wombats, but we managed it all today. So yeah, big applause for Joshua, Bob, DeWitt, John, Nicole, and Cindy. And I'm sure Mark has some closing words of wisdom. He generally does for us to take into the next fortnight. So Mark, can I throw to you? No pressure.
Thanks. Well, first of all, thank you all for this fantastic New Year celebration reading. As we know, we're moving into a better era. We know that. And at least we have a gentleman president forthcoming. That's what I say. But thank you so much, Kristina, for your wonderful reading. Willis, for your blues guitar. Rick, for tuning in from California and also a wonderful reading. Lloyd, what can I say? You know, let's meet up and have a couple of coffees. And Jessica, well, thank you for taking us through that amazing tour of dance and poetry all at once. This was a fantastic reading. Thank you everybody for participating. Thank you everybody for listening in. As we said earlier, Lit Balm will now move to bi-weekly events. So our next event, as I said earlier, is a celebration of Russell Edson's poetry and readings and from his letters and prose, featuring Nina Andrews, Denise Duhamel, Chad Nord, Maxine Chernoff, Jan Lombardo, Jeff Friedman, Peter Johnson, and Cassandra, our co-host. And that's on January 16, so 2 weeks from now. And then 2 weeks after that, we have an amazing feature of New Zealand poets, including Ian Britton, Lisa Samuels, and Jen Crawford. And we have lots of other stuff coming up, all sorts of exciting things. Well, yeah, let's just get through this strange time and come out the other side. And I think we are. And thank to God, we have a leader who is going to help us in that regard as well. So I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful new year, and let's be hopeful and loving and full of solace and peace and understanding and poetry. Good night, everybody.
Good night.